Hi guys, today we're going to talk about all of my least favorite books of 2022. Luckily, this video should not be very long. The list itself is a lot shorter than my favorite books of 2022, so that's a good sign. I feel like this year I was a lot faster to DNF books that I just was not feeling. Some of them I didn't even log on Goodreads because I got like 10 pages in. I was like, this is not for me. Nope. So I suffered through like a lot less garbage than I think I did in years past. That said, I still did suffer a little bit, so let's get into it. We're gonna start with the DNFs that I read long enough to actually log on my Goodreads. First off is Booked on a Feeling by J.C. Lee. This is an ARC that I received from NetGalley. It's a romance novel, and it follows a lawyer and it's like a friends to lovers romance. She reconnects with like a childhood friend, and she's burned out from her lawyer job, and she goes back to her small hometown running a bookstore or something, even though I think she's just on sabbatical from work. And I didn't even get to the point where her and her friend started like hooking up or anything, because I just really did not like the writing style of this one. I think I made it about like 30% of the way through, but the writing style just felt super amateur. These adult characters were very much acting like children, I thought. There was a specific thing, I think, in the beginning where she was like writing about how she went from like the office to the courthouse, and just the way that it was written, I was like, why is she telling me like every little step of this? It just felt unnecessary. And even though she was supposedly a lawyer, it just like felt she was very incompetent, which is, it's not impossible, but I just didn't love reading about that, I guess. And yeah, again, I didn't even really get to the point where her and the love interest, like they just barely started feeling like attraction to one another, or at least she did to him. I think he's harbored a crush on her forever, but like, I just got 30% of the way through this, and it never described, like, how these characters had even met as kids or anything. It's just like, oh yeah, we were childhood friends. We never got any backstory on that, and I don't know. So, like, the setup for the romance was just, like, really lacking for me, and I just did not care, and I ended up DNFing, which I try not to do with ARCs, but I think DNFing in itself is a sign of, the quality of a book, so, meh. And then I got like 75%, these were back to back, which was extra brutal. I got like 75% of the way through My Favorite Half Nightstand by Christina Lauren before I was just so done with the main character that I had to put it down. I also gave a Christina Lauren book a 5-star rating this year, so they're just all over the place for me. I don't know why, but like the setup of this particular story was awful, and the character, like the main character, was so unlikable. Our main character, whose name I don't even remember, is like the only girl in this group of guy friends. They all like work for the same school or like university or something, and there's like this event coming up that they all want dates to, so they all agree to go on like a dating app to find a date for this event. Our main character decides to sign up with like her real name, where like her friends know her by like her middle name or something. So she's not lying in her dating app, but like no one really quite like puts 2 and 2 together and realizes it's her. Even the picture she posts is like a little bit more artsy, like not super recognizable as her. And she ends up matching with like her best friend from the group of this guys. And when they match, she thinks that, like, he knows that it's her at first. So they start talking. But then she quickly realizes that he does not realize it's her. And then they keep talking, and she never goes, hey, it's me, your friend. So she's kind of catfishing him. And, like, she gets to this point where, like, she's actually hooking up in real life with this guy, but he doesn't know that she's the girl from the app, and he's starting to develop feelings for the girl from the app, who is her, but he doesn't realize it's her, while also having like a friends with benefits relationship with her. And she starts getting salty when he like leaves the room with her to like go talk to his app person, which is also her. Like she just becomes jealous of herself, and it's like, if you just told him it was you, this would solve all of your problems. Yeah, so like the main character just got so unlikable to me. I just couldn't read it anymore. It was so cringe. I was not rooting for her at all. I just felt sorry for the guy friend, and yeah, this is the only Christina Lauren book I've DNF'd. But it's a bummer because I was excited to read about it. I don't think I quite realized the extent of, like, the catfishing thing. This was horrible, and I DNF'd it. But if I had finished it, I would have given it 1 star. And then the last DNF that I have that I logged on Goodreads was The Book of Accidents by Chuck Wendig. This wasn't, like, offensive or anything, but I was just so bored. Which is a bummer because, like, I was really excited to read this book. I was specifically putting it aside for October, spooky season. Like, I was like, oh yeah, haunted house, let's go. And then, like, it just felt so convoluted, but, like, I didn't care about any one aspect. The book starts with this guy inheriting a house from his father, and his father and him had a horrible relationship. His father was pretty abusive, and so initially this guy doesn't want anything to do with this house. It only harbors bad memories, but at this point he has a family of his own, and the best decision for his family is to move into this house. And, like, weird stuff kind of starts to happen, and, like, his wife is a sculptor, and, like, a couple of her sculptures come to life, but she kind of blacks out, so she doesn't really realize what's happening. His son can sense people's sadness and despair, and, like, he's really bullied, and, like, that's a whole thing. But then there's this plot line dealing with, like, a convict who was executed maybe, like, 20 years prior, and maybe he's haunting, like, a park or, like, this tunnel. And then there's also this, like, a mine accident happened or something. And there's, like, a dead kid who's I don't know. It was way too much going on. And I was initially intrigued, but the creepiness was, like, too distributed to too many aspects. And I just couldn't see how they were all going to connect. And when it got to a point that I was like, I don't care, then I just put it down because I wasn't feeling it, and I had other books that I wanted to read in October. So I'm so disappointed by this one because I feel like I'd heard really good things about this book in particular, but also Chuck Wendig as an author, and that was the first book I'd ever read by him. So that was a bummer. Moving on to books that I actually did finish, starting off with a real heavy hitter, we have The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This is a book of the month, booktube, book talk, bookstagram darling. This is, like, one of the most recommended thrillers I have ever seen. I actually read The Maidens before I read The Silent Patient, and that was Alex Michaelides' second book. I believe that came out last year. And that one was kind of lackluster for me, but, like, I didn't actively hate the main character the way that I hated the main character in The Silent Patient. And I get he's not necessarily supposed to be likable, but, like, oh. So our main character in The Silent Patient is, I believe, like, a psychotherapist, and he ends up basically quitting the job that he has at this other hospital or firm or something to work at the hospital that is taking care of this patient named Alicia, who killed her husband and hasn't spoken a word since, presumably applying to killing her husband. But she's this really famous painter, and she also painted the scene, I believe. So he's really intrigued by her case, and he is, like, convinced he is the one that is going to get her talking again and admitting what happened and why. And I hated him. I don't even remember his name. I remember Alicia being the silent patient, but, like, I do not remember the main character's name. I just found him detestable. Again, I don't think you're supposed to like him. But I also hated the way Michaelides wrote Alicia as a character. It just, like, it was very much like men writing women, and that was really annoying. Didn't care for that. I also thought the twist was super dumb. I'm sorry. I honestly wish I had just looked it up. It was so, like, anticlimactic and disappointing. So yeah, that's my hot take of 2022. I know this is a very well-loved book. I still see people giving this a positive review, and that's fine. It just wasn't for me. I have a really hard time with thrillers in the first place. It's not my go-to genre, so I probably shouldn't have expected to like this one much at all, but I had high hopes because so many people love this book. It just was not for me. So I gave it 2 stars. Probably kind of generous. 1 stars I usually reserve for like offensive books, and this wasn't quite that. It was just like very eye-rolly. Next up is one that I thought I was gonna love because it is fantasy, and that is Spear by Nicola Griffith. I really love a fantasy like standalone novella, and I thought this was gonna do it for me. It's also a King Arthur retelling, which I love typically, and I don't know, this one just felt, it's weird because it felt so removed from King Arthur, but like Nicola Griffith specifically was like trying to go to like the roots of the King Arthur legend, which is not as very clean cut as it has become over time. Our main character in Spear is a woman who's the daughter of like a witch, but she later becomes like what I believe is like Sir Kay, and I don't know, I just didn't care. I really disliked the prose in this. I think that was actually, like, the story itself was fine. It was a little weird, but it felt, like, very emotionally detached. And I thought, like, having a King Arthur retelling where one of the knights is actually a woman and maybe they're trans, I'm not sure. It was written so vague. I can't really, like, tell what Nicola Griffith was trying to do with that. Definitely had some, like, queer rep going on, which is cool, and I was intrigued to see that in a King Arthur retelling, but like just the way that it was written, like I said, was so detached, and I just was not invested at all in either the character or the plot line. So this one was more just like, it was boring to me, wasn't my thing. I think it's Hild is her other book that's like really popular in the historical fiction fantasy realm, but like I have no interest in picking that up now because I disliked this book so much. Like, if I can barely get through a novella, I'm sure as heck not gonna get through a full-size novel. So, sorry to any Nicola Griffith fans out there, but this one was not it, and I gave it 2 stars. Next up, we have another romance, and that is Funny You Should Ask by, I believe it's Elisa Sussman. Which is funny because this book is kind of sus. There was a lot of buzz around this book when it first came out. It became very popular, I think, immediately. Part of that is because it feels very inspired by a real life event in which Chris Evans and a reporter had kind of like a weekend fling thing, maybe a fling, I'm not sure if it was actually a fling, but like he took her to a movie premiere and she met his parents like in a single weekend while she was just trying to interview him for her magazine or something, and it just like it turned into this whole viral thing, and people were really romanticizing the heck out of it because like it was such a weird experience. So that's cool, like good for that reporter, but like this book just felt like a straight ripoff of that event, and then there was like no mention in the acknowledgments at all about that whole thing. So it's like, it seems like the author herself just like refuses to acknowledge that like, yeah, this was inspired by a real life event and like a different writer and stuff. And so that gives me the ick a little bit, but that's not even like the main reason I didn't care for this book. Like actively reading it, I did not care for it. And like all that other stuff kind of just added on to my dislike for this book. I have a hard time, I think, with celebrity romances because like I don't buy it. Which feels bad because like celebrities, they're people too, but like nothing about the setup of this book felt like a believable foundation for a romance for me. Like you have the initial weekend where it was like a very much like did they or didn't they situation that plagues this author for like the next 10 or 15 years of her life. But like, I just don't believe that her and this actor had this like sustained connection over time, and that like that one weekend they fell in love with each other and then things just didn't go right for them, and that 10 years later like they could come back and rekindle those feelings. It just doesn't feel like enough of a foundation for me to like jump 10 years and buy that they still have feelings for each other. I definitely believe that they were attracted to each other in that first weekend and stuff, but yeah, it just I've read very few celebrity romances that I've actually like, and this was not one of them. So I gave that one 2 stars. It was fine, but like I didn't love it, and then all the drama kind of outside of the actual narrative of the book was also kind of gross to me. And then finally, I actually gave this book 3 stars in the moment. It's probably more like a 2.5 if I'm being more realistic, but the ending was like just promising enough that I'm like, okay. And also, I really like this author, so I'm mostly adding it to this list because I love this author so much, and this book in particular was so disappointing to me. And that is Book of Night by Holly Black. This is the one book on this list that I do still own, actually. It's up there. I'm only holding on to it because of, like, I'm holding out for the second book in hopes that it'll get better. This just felt so strange to me. I previously have read the Folk of the Air series, really loved that. I know that Holly Black is a capable writer. I just don't like the direction she went in for this story. It was technically her adult debut, but it still felt very YA. And, like, the parts that didn't feel YA, it felt like it was trying way too hard to be, like, edgy and different from her other stuff. And I just don't think she needed to do that. The main character, Charlie, is a thief. The plot of this book really surrounds, like, shadow magic, which I think has a lot of potential, but, like, just, it was never explained enough for me to care about. But, like, ultimately it really came down to the characters. Like, I did not find Charlie likable, was not really rooting for her. The narrative was constantly telling me how good of a thief she was and how clever she was, but, like, it wasn't really doing anything to show that to me. It just felt like way over explained, and again, it was such a departure from Holly Black's other stuff, and, like, it didn't even feel like her writing. So I was just kind of left feeling confused by it, which was super disappointing because I thought that this book was gonna be good, and it was very meh. The ending, again, has some potential, I think, for the second book, but I really hope that whatever her next adult book is a big departure from Book of Night, because that was not it. I really want, like, an adult fae book from her. Like, that's her strong suit. I'm not saying she's not capable of writing other stuff, but, like, give the people what they want, Holly. But yeah, so that wraps up my least favorite books of 2022. Again, I don't think that list is very long. I feel like I'm getting better every year at picking up books that, like, I'm actually going to enjoy, and putting down books very early on that I know that I'm just not feeling. So maybe there will come a year where I don't even do a least favorite books of 20 whatever, because I've just perfected my book picking up selection. Probably unlikely, but it doesn't hurt to dream. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to leave a comment down below. What was your least favorite book of the year? Sorry if I offended anybody by telling you that one of your favorite books is a least favorite of mine. Reading taste is so subjective. My opinions are not, like, a direct attack on anybody else, so apologies, but it's fun to be a hater sometimes, and this is my one video a year where I let that kind of flow through. So thank you guys again for watching. Feel free to follow my socials down in the description box below, like this video, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. That'd be super cool. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Bye.